My wife of 9 years cheated, got pregnant, and I divorced her after seeking revenge. After 9 years of marriage, I thought I knew everything there was to know about my wife. Our lives seemed perfect, at least that's what I believed. But everything changed when I found out the shocking truth. My wife had cheated on me and was now pregnant with someone else's child. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I could have imagined. And at that moment, I realized that the life I had worked so hard to build was built on lies. What followed was a whirlwind of pain, anger, and betrayal. The idea of revenge consumed me. I had to make sure that both she and her lover faced the consequences of their actions. But little did I know that seeking revenge would lead to a series of events that would change everything, not only for me but for all of us involved. This story will take you on a journey through heartbreak, vengeance, and ultimately, my decision to end it all, divorce, and everything else that came with it. Stick around to hear the full story. I had always prided myself on being a good husband. We met when we were both in our mid-20s, and our connection was instant. She was everything I had ever wanted. Smart, beautiful, and full of life. We got married after 3 years of dating, and life seemed to follow a predictable, comfortable path. We bought a house, adopted a dog, and settled into what I thought was a perfect routine. But as the years went by, I started noticing subtle changes in her behavior. At first, they were so small that I brushed them off. Late nights at work, extra time spent on her phone, less enthusiasm when we did things together. I convinced myself that life had just gotten busier. After all, we had been married for nearly a decade. It wasn't uncommon for a relationship to enter a phase where things felt a bit routine, right? But deep down, I knew something was off. Then, one evening, everything came crashing down. I came home early from work, expecting to surprise her with a nice dinner. As I opened the door, I saw her in a way I had never seen before. Distressed, crying, and holding a pregnancy test. The test wasn't just positive. It was clear that she was pregnant. But this was where things took an unexpected turn. She wasn't pregnant with my child. The father was someone else. She didn't say a word, but the guilt on her face was enough. Took everything in me not to scream or lash out. I stood there, staring at her, trying to process the overwhelming wave of emotions. Betrayal, anger, confusion. All of them mixing together in a storm I could not control. The silence was deafening. I could see that she wanted to explain, but there was nothing she could say that could ever make this right. The news hit like a ton of bricks. We had spent 9 years building a life together, and I thought I knew her better than anyone else in the world. Yet, here I was, standing in the doorway, watching my marriage crumble in an instant. Her affair had been going on for months, maybe longer. It was hard to believe that she had been able to hide it from me for so long. I had always trusted her, never once doubting her loyalty. That trust, now shattered, felt like a betrayal in itself. As she finally spoke, the words came slowly, almost as if she knew there was no way to undo the damage she had done. She told me about the affair, how it started as a simple friendship with a colleague. But soon it turned into something much more. She admitted to having been emotionally and physically involved with him for months. The worst part? She had fallen in love with him. I felt my world spiral out of control. The woman I had loved, trusted, and built my life with was now telling me that she had been living a double life all this time. But what really stung was the pregnancy. She was carrying his child. For the past few weeks, she had tried to figure out what to do, and her confession came as a result of her own guilt. In that moment, I saw a side of her that I never knew existed. There was no apology, no remorse in her eyes. She simply looked defeated, as if she had given up on us long before I ever found out. She begged me to forgive her, but I couldn't find it within myself to even listen. The betrayal was too deep. The life I had known was gone, and I was left with nothing but the ruins of a marriage built on lies. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I had to make sure that the truth was exposed and that everyone involved paid the price. The days after her confession were a blur. I barely slept, barely ate. My mind was consumed by 1,000 questions. How could she do this to me? What had I missed? Had I been that blind? But one thing was certain. I was not going to let her walk away without facing the consequences. At first, I tried to gather as much information as I could. I needed to know the truth, every detail, no matter how much it hurt. I began to track her movements, analyzing every piece of the puzzle that had been hidden from me. I checked her phone, and there they were. Texts, messages, pictures. The affair had been far deeper than I had imagined. She had spent months with him, Planning the future she was now telling me she wanted with him. The texts were so casual, so intimate. They talked about their plans for the baby, how she was going to leave me and start over with him. Each message made my stomach turn, but they also gave me the clarity I needed. She had been planning this for a while. I wasn't the one who had been blind, I had simply been trusting. That realization made the betrayal hurt even more. I remember the moment when I found the message that sealed it all. It was a picture, a sonogram. The child she was carrying was his. There was no denying it. The baby growing inside her was not mine. I had never felt more lost in my life. But I couldn't just wallow in pain. I had to act. I had to take control of the situation. The first step was making sure she could not hide behind any false narratives. I gathered evidence, photographs, and copies of their messages. I contacted a lawyer, preparing myself for the inevitable divorce. I wanted to make sure that when I ended this marriage, she would have no chance of hiding the truth. As I compiled everything, I was hit with another shocking discovery. She wasn't just seeing him behind my back. She had been lying to her friends, to my family, and even to our therapist. Every story she had spun about us was designed to make me look like the bad guy. She painted herself as the victim of a failed marriage, justifying her actions in every conversation. I had been left completely in the dark, while she played everyone around her. This realization made my blood boil. She had not only cheated on me, she had manipulated everyone into believing that I was the problem. I was the one who had been blindsided, not her. And now, she had the audacity to want me to forgive her, to take her back into my life. But I couldn't just let this go. It wasn't enough to gather the evidence. It wasn't enough to prepare for the divorce. I had to make sure that she would never forget what she had done, that the consequences of her actions would be far-reaching. It wasn't just about her betrayal. It was about making sure that she understood the magnitude of the pain she had caused. I went to the lawyer and discussed my options. It became clear that in order to really hurt her, I would have to expose the affair. I didn't want her to just get away with it, to walk off into the sunset with a new life and a new family. No, I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly what she had done. I began to collect more information about the affair partner. His name was Greg. I learned where he lived, where he worked, and even the details about his own personal life. It didn't take long to discover that he had a family of his own. He was married with 2 young children. I felt a dark sense of satisfaction as I learned more about his life. He had been playing both sides, cheating on his wife just like my wife had been cheating on me. The hypocrisy of it all was almost too much to bear. I knew I couldn't just confront him. I had to be strategic. So, I started to gather more damning evidence about Greg. I hired a private investigator to follow him, to find out more about his life and what he had been hiding. It didn't take long before the investigator uncovered some disturbing facts. Greg was not just a cheater, he was also involved in some questionable business practices. He had been lying to his wife, hiding money, and making shady deals. This information gave me leverage. It gave me the power to destroy him just like he had destroyed me. I was not going to let him walk away unscathed. But I also knew I couldn't act impulsively. I had to be careful with how I handled everything. I needed to make sure that when I exposed their affair, I had everything in place to make them both pay the price for what they had done. As I sat there, looking at all the evidence I had gathered, I felt a sense of control that I had never felt before. I was no longer the victim in this story. I was the one in charge, and I wasn't going to let them get away with destroying my life. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment. The moment when everything would be laid bare, when the truth would finally come out. The affair, the lies, the manipulation, it all had to be exposed. My mind was set on making sure that neither my wife nor her lover could hide from the reality of what they had done. I contacted a private investigator, someone who specialized in uncovering the kinds of secrets people tried to bury. I had already gathered a fair amount of evidence, but I needed more. I needed to ensure that when I confronted her, I could watch her crumble under the weight of her own lies. It wasn't just about hurting her anymore. It was about forcing her to face the consequences. I had no intention of simply letting her walk away without any repercussions. She had taken everything from me, and now it was time to make her see the pain she had caused. The investigator came back with damning information. Not only had my wife been sleeping with Greg, but she had also been doing everything in her power to hide it. She had lied about where she was going, deleted texts, and even manipulated her friends into believing that I was the one with the issues in our relationship. Her entire life had been one big act. I was furious, but there was something else. I felt a sense of clarity. I was no longer the victim, I had the truth on my side. I was the one in control, and it was time to take action. With everything in place, I decided it was time to confront her. I had already made arrangements to meet with her, a neutral location, just to keep things calm. It wasn't about making a scene, it was about making sure she knew that I knew everything. As I sat there waiting for her, I felt a strange sense of calm. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind over and over again, and now it was finally happening. She walked in, looking as though nothing had changed. There was no hint of guilt on her face, no sign of regret. She smiled at me, the same smile she had given me for years. "Hey you," she said, sitting down across from me. I didn't smile back. I didn't say anything at first. Instead, I just stared at her, watching her every move. There was something almost surreal about this moment. For so long, I had been oblivious to the truth. But now, the truth was right in front of me. "You've been busy, haven't you?" I finally said, my voice steady, but colder than I had ever heard it before. She blinked, surprised by the tone. "What do you mean?" I slid the pile of papers across the table. Pictures, messages, screenshots, the evidence was undeniable. Her face paled as she looked down at the collection of documents. She reached for one, then another, her hands trembling. But she didn't say a word. "You lied to me," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "You lied to everyone. You've been living a double life, and now it's all here. Your affair with Greg. The pregnancy. The baby you're carrying is his, not mine. How long did you think you could keep this from me? How long did you think you could make a fool of me?" Her eyes filled with panic. She looked like a deer caught in headlights. But I wasn't done yet. "I want you to understand something," I continued, my voice unwavering. "I'm not angry because you cheated. I'm angry because you thought you could walk all over me. You thought I wouldn't find out. You thought you could make your own rules while leaving me in the dark. And that's the part one can't forgive." She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I could see her mind racing, trying to come up with some explanation, some justification for her actions. But there was nothing she could say. "You were never honest with me," I said. "You've been lying, manipulating, and hiding everything for months. And now you want to act surprised that I'm not going to let you get away with it? Do you think I'm just going to forgive you and move on like nothing happened?" She didn't respond, just sat there in stunned silence. It was clear that she hadn't expected me to know all the details, to have everything laid out in front of her. But I wasn't going to let her spin her lies anymore. "I'm divorcing you," I said, finally. "And I'm going to make sure you lose everything. The house, the money, I'm taking it all. You'll have nothing left but the mess you've created. And Greg? Don't think I'm going to let him off easy either." Her face turned red with rage. "You don't know what you're talking about. You can't do this. I'll fight you every step of the way." "Oh, I'm sure you will," I said, leaning back in my chair. "But the truth is, it's already too late. The damage has been done. I've already taken the first step in ensuring that you and Greg pay for everything you've done. You won't be able to hide from this. Not anymore." I could see the fear in her eyes now. She knew she had lost. She had no way of getting out of this. Her entire life, her marriage, her future. All of it was crumbling in front of her. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of justice. This wasn't about revenge for the sake of revenge. This was about making sure that they both understood the pain they had caused. And I would make sure they paid for it. The silence in the room was deafening. She was no longer the person I had spent 9 years with. She was a stranger, a liar, a cheater, and I was done with her. The divorce proceedings were a blur. Everything moved quickly, and while I had expected the process to be long and drawn out, it seemed like the weight of the truth had already shattered my wife's confidence. She had no idea how to defend herself, not when the evidence was irrefutable. Her affair, her lies. It all came crashing down so fast, and she couldn't pick up the pieces. But what was most difficult for me wasn't the paperwork or the back and forth in court. It was the aftermath. The realization that I had spent nearly a decade of my life with someone who didn't value me, didn't love me, and had betrayed me in ways I couldn't have imagined. The first few weeks after the confrontation were a blur of anger, frustration, and numbness. The house was empty, quieter than it had ever been. There was no more pretending, no more small talk over dinner. Just silence. The silence of betrayal, of a life that had been upended. I focused on work. I buried myself in my career, staying late at the office, taking on projects that would keep my mind occupied. But even the long hours couldn't erase the feelings of resentment that lingered. Every time I walked past the bedroom we used to share, I was reminded of the life I thought I had. And now that life was gone. My wife had moved out shortly after we filed for divorce. She didn't fight for the house. She didn't even try. It was as though she knew there was no coming back from what she had done. Her affair partner, Greg, was a different story. He was still trying to convince her that he was the one who truly loved her. He wasn't willing to accept responsibility for the role he had played in destroying our marriage. But that didn't matter. I had made it clear to both of them that they would pay for what they had done. It was during this time that I began to gain a sense of clarity. I realized that my revenge wasn't about the house or the money. It was about reclaiming control over my life, about making sure they understood the consequences of their actions. In the end, that was what mattered most. I contacted a lawyer. I wanted to ensure that my wife couldn't hide anything from me, especially when it came to assets. It was clear to me now that she would try to manipulate the system if given the chance. But I wasn't going to let that happen. Through careful investigation, I found out that my wife had been hiding assets, properties and investments that she had secretly stashed away during our marriage. I had always trusted her, but I had learned the hard way that trust was not something to be given so freely. I exposed everything. I made sure the court saw the full extent of her deception. The divorce was finalized a few months later, and I walked away with everything I had worked for. The house, the money, the investments, everything that was rightfully mine. But the real victory came when I finally let go of the anger, when I no longer felt the need to seek revenge. By reclaiming my life and my future, I had won. My ex-wife tried to reach out a few times, sending messages and even calling. She begged for forgiveness, claiming that she had made a mistake. But I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She had made her choice, and it was time for me to move on. I took time to heal, to rediscover who I was without her. I started exercising again, something I had neglected during our marriage. I traveled, did things I had always wanted to do but never had the chance. And slowly, the hurt began to fade. In the end, I realized that I didn't need to carry the weight of the betrayal with me anymore. I had the power to choose my own path, to build a future that was free from the lies and manipulation that had defined my past. My life was mine again. As for my ex-wife and Greg, they continued to live with the consequences of their actions. I heard rumors that they had tried to get back together, but it never seemed to last. The damage had been done. Trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to rebuild. And for them, it was clear that they were both living with the repercussions of the choices they had made. I never wished them ill, but I didn't feel the need to offer them any sympathy either. They had made their bed, and now they had to lie in it. For me, the most important lesson I learned from this entire ordeal was that I am worth more than betrayal. I am stronger than I thought, and I have the power to rebuild my life on my own terms, without relying on anyone who isn't fully committed to my happiness. The past is behind me now, and the future is wide open. If you found this story captivating, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another incredible tale.